right, thank you, and welcome. So this is the world's first 24-hour Follow the Sun automation event, and it's awesome that you joined us, took time from your day to join us here in Sydney for the second stop of this tour here at the Dalton House. I got a chance to catch up with, it looks like many of you, last night at the meetup. And I talked with folks who surely are based here, but people who are joining us from Melbourne, from Singapore, and even from Tokyo. And I got a chance to hear a little bit about how you're using automation or DevOps and, in many cases, Puppet technology in really cool ways. One of the things that was apparent across all the conversations I had is that regardless what kind of engineer you are, so if you're building applications, if you're running infrastructure, or if you're automating software delivery, engineering is ultimately a creative endeavor. And so you all rely on automation to remove the mundane, the error-prone, and the repetitive tasks from your job so that you can use that creativity and creatively solve really challenging problems through the software you deliver. It's remarkable when I look back and think about, Puppet around a decade or so ago had introduced and been pioneering what at that time was a pretty radical idea. The notion of taking your infrastructure and managing it as code. And so over the course of the last set of years, this idea and the approaches for infrastructure as code, it's become really commonplace. I mean, there's software-defined everything. And it's really interesting to see how the worlds of infrastructure and application delivery are blending. And ultimately, what we start to see is that the practices associated with that, the technologies, and even your roles, those are starting to blend as well. And that can be pretty complicated. Ultimately, you have a set of practices that are merging, and you end up kind of keeping feet in two worlds. You have today's world and tomorrow's. And in today's world, you have your applications and the infrastructure stacks that you're modernizing. And you're also picking up a whole new set of workflows for tomorrow's world as you take and build, deploy containerized apps and push them into the cloud. And so now more than ever, you need to have a simple and a flexible way to kind of manage it all. You need a way to be able to get insights and look across your team, the teams next to you, all the different projects that you're working on, and see where are we having success and how do we take that success with DevOps and with automation and scale it to other projects and other pockets within the organization. And you need a way to measure your progress. Are you making an impact? So that you can continuously improve throughout that process. Well, that's what today is about. And so as you learn from speakers, as you get a chance to network with peers throughout the course of the day, I ask you to just take a step back and ask yourselves, what's your role in this change? As the worlds of application delivery and infrastructure automation blend, how does that impact your organization? How does your organization need to adapt and evolve through that? With that understanding, you'll be able to help not only yourself, but your team and your entire organization navigate what could be a pretty difficult set of changes. And in fact, get really great at that kind of change and thrive in this increasingly software-driven world. And ultimately, get more time back so that you can use that creativity to solve the next wave of emerging and challenging problems through the software that you deliver. Like you, Puppet's been transforming, and a lot has changed in the year. I want to highlight some of the change that we as an organization have been through. Like Nigel had mentioned, this event, it's part of our process of becoming a much more global company. Less than a year and a half ago, we outgrew our office here in Sydney, and we moved to a gorgeous new space in the CBD. Not long after that, we opened up an office in Singapore. And not long after that, one in Tokyo. And just recently, we expanded into Timișoara, Romania. Ultimately, so we could be closer to you and your counterparts, our customers, all around the world. We acquired two companies, Distelli and Reflect. You're going to be seeing some of the fantastic technologies that we added to our portfolio from them later today. And beyond adding great technology, we added fantastic experts to the Puppet family. We've expanded our product portfolio from a single product that was the leading solution in configuration management, and we now have an entire portfolio focused on DevOps and automation solutions. And we've forged tighter relationships within the industry because, well, hopefully, it makes your lives easier. So we partnered with some of the, deepened our partnerships and made them stronger through the work that we've done with a lot of the vendors that you also rely on aside from Puppet. So the likes of Cisco and Splunk, AWS, Google, just to name a few. And my favorite part about all this is over the course of the last year, we've added hundreds of customers around the world that have joined you on this journey to taking the success that you're having with automation and bringing it throughout the rest of your organization. And so really, what a difference a year makes. A year ago this week, we showed this slide at our event. And we talked about a trend that we saw emerging within DevOps and automation. And what we saw happening was teams were really successful with their DevOps practices. They were delivering a lot faster, more frequently. The quality of what they were producing was better. But ultimately, it was happening across 2, 3, or a few teams within an enterprise. Most organizations we work with, well, they have dozens, if not hundreds of teams. And so we started to look at, well, what are some indications of how people can progress and take advantage of the success that they're seeing in one area and bring it somewhere else in their organization? We introduced a host of metrics, including, well, how automated are you? And how do you go from having, out of all the change that you're pushing out to your infrastructure, your middleware, your applications, how do you go from having 10, 15, 20% of that change automated to having closer to 80, 90, and start to really approach close to 100% of the change that you push out being entirely automated? I've never saw such a stark example of this difference or this discrepancy within an organization until a couple months ago. I was working with, we did a half-day DevOps workshop at a large global financial institution. And during one of the breaks, I was talking with a couple of the team leads. They were from different teams on the same campus, actually just a couple buildings away, but they were in really different phases of their DevOps and automation journeys. The guy that I knew the best, I had been working with him for a couple years. They had gotten to the point where they were deploying changes to their middleware, some of their Oracle databases, some of their web servers, and they were doing it at least once a week. Well, his counterpart, sitting across the table from him, almost fell out of his chair because he said, we are lucky to deploy changes to the same kind of middleware once or maybe twice a year. And so what Puppet has been up to over the course of the last year has been, how do we take that success that our customers, and many of you are having, and help you make that more widespread and more pervasive across the other teams that you work with and through the stacks that you currently manage. In order to scale and increase how automated you are or the success that you're seeing across the organization, we think that two things are needed. One, DevOps has to become the way that not just you work, or not just some of the rock star teams within your organization works, but ultimately how everyone across the organization works. And then the second thing is that these practices need to be tightly integrated, but open and flexible to give you the insights that you need in order to measure your progress, in order to measure the impact that this change is having, so that you can continuously improve. The good news is, I think we're at a fantastic point where people have picked up and got really great at these DevOps practices. And the wonderful and promising technologies out there, especially the tools across the DevOps toolchain, are now at a point where I think those are merging more powerfully than ever before. I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about, before we spend most of the rest of this presentation, as well as the rest of the day, talking about some of the stuff that's new, either that we just announced today or we'll be announcing before long, and talk a little bit about the portfolio expansion that we've made over the course of the last year. All of the products and updates that we have made to our existing portfolio during the last year have aimed at helping you and the rest of your counterparts around the world be successful at DevOps and automation, but do it in a way that's repeatable across the rest of your organization. So last year, this week, we announced in a beta mode, Puppet Discovery. In May, we released it as a generally available product. And what Puppet Discovery does is it makes either getting started with automation or progressing from wherever you're at way more apparent, and way more automatic. It looks across your entire fleet, so we don't care if you have resources running in any of the big public clouds. We don't care if you have resources that you want to look at that are running on-prem in either physical or virtualized parts of your environment. Just today, as part of our 1.6 release, we included support for OpenStack if you're using that for driving your private cloud. We have also the first Japanese available version today as part of 1.6 as well. And the goal of Puppet Discovery is to look across your entire estate and do a few things. First of all, show you what you have. So we'll even introspect containers you have running in the cloud all the way back through what you have running on-prem. And it's not just so that you have a pane of glass that shows you all of the resources that you have in a real-time inventory kind of way. But it allows you to reach through that glass and do something about it. Take some sort of action. So that if you realize, hey, out of the 7 different versions of OpenSSL that we're running, 2 of them have known vulnerabilities, and we're not automating those in any sort of deliberate or consistent way, I can now take those into the fold and apply modern automation practices to those. We, of course, released updates to our flagship product, Puppet Enterprise. And most of these updates have been all targeted on, as you scale your automation success, how can you do that more broadly across more domains within your estate? And how can you do it more effectively through the entire stack, from your core infrastructure through your middleware and the applications sitting on top of it? And because we're not just all building and running infrastructure for the sake of doing it, that ultimately there are some set of applications and services running on top of it, we introduced Puppet Pipelines. And there's a few flavors of products within this product family. We have Puppet Pipelines for containers, and that helps people automate the build, test, and deploy portions of their workflow for containerized applications that you're deploying to Kubernetes. We have a container registry that goes along with that as well. And then the third product within that family is Puppet Pipelines for applications. These are for your traditionally packaged applications, so things like RPMs or what have you that you're deploying to virtualized environments. And that's not it. As part of this as well, we introduced Puppet Bolt. You're going to hear Yasmin show you some of the most recent capabilities of this in just a moment. And Bolt helps you quickly and easily get started with modern automation. You can use it in concert with Puppet. It's behind the scenes of Puppet Discovery. It's now included as a supported set of capabilities within Puppet Enterprise, or you can use it standalone. There have been over 90,000 downloads in the course of the last year, and almost 200 of the modules on the Puppet Forge have been updated to include task capabilities that Bolt can execute in an agentless and remote way. We also took the power of Puppet Pipelines for automating that build, test, and deploy portions of your application delivery process, and we brought it to our infrastructure as code. And so continuous delivery for Puppet Enterprise takes those same proven workflows and out of the box lets you treat your Puppet code just like you do your application code and applying consistent best practices for deploying that in a safe, scalable, and effective way across your entire estate. What I find most exciting, sure, we've been busy, but getting a chance to talk with many of you last night, it's apparent, well, you've all been busy as well. I got a chance to catch up with folks from CBA, from Monash University, from Transurban, from Declarative Systems, and a host of others. And it was great to get a chance to hear, well, what kind of progress have all of you been making over the course of the last year as well? So when I was chatting with Brent and Daniel from Transurban, they're going to be up here later this afternoon. They were talking about using Puppet in concert with some of their other key technologies like VRA as well as ServiceNow, and how they've taken success that they've had, how they're taking success with updating their provisioning. Something that used to take weeks now takes a matter of minutes, and their constituents can just self-provision all that on their own. They have some really cool stuff that they've done with Power BI as well, but I'll leave that to them and make sure to join them for their presentation later today. I got a chance to catch up with Brendan from Monash University, and he was talking about how he used Puppet to consistently apply state that he wanted, his automation team wanted to manage their Unix and their Linux fleet. They were so successful there that they're now in the process of doing the same sort of thing for how they provision Windows environments, and then soon actually running the day 2 operations with that as well. And they're even running a pilot on how to do the same sort of thing across parts of their desktop fleet. It's awesome to see this sort of progress that all of you have been making over the course of the past year or so. And beyond talking with many of you, we engage with thousands of our customers over the course of a year. And so we learn a lot. But in addition to that, we also do what's become the most comprehensive set of research and body of knowledge on the state of DevOps on the entire planet. And so just weeks ago, we published our annual State of DevOps report. And it has a really unique vantage point on the industry. For the first time, and really the only time in the course of any research that's been done on DevOps, we've given really prescriptive and pragmatic ways for understanding, well, where are you in your journey? And how do you get to the next stage of evolution? There's some pretty interesting findings that popped out to us over the course of this project. One of the things that I find really interesting is that when you take a look at the entire curve of where people are and their evolution for their journey down their DevOps path, most folks, to the tune of 80%, they fall right in the middle. So you have 10% that are the laggards, 10% that are ahead of the pack, but it's a pretty massive swath of us that are right in the middle of this curve. And so that tells us a couple things. One thing that it tells us is that, well, at least people are starting to adopt and see some success from DevOps practices. And in many cases, it's actually pretty easy. Or if it's not easy, it's at least straightforward. But the other thing that it tells us is that it's really hard to break out of that middle pack and evolve and mature to the next degree, where you really start to capitalize in a more widespread way around the benefits that DevOps are delivering, speeding your delivery, increasing your security posture, increasing your quality, and doing all of this in concert. It's really a lot harder to figure out how to do that, or take the success that you see with a team or two doing that and translate it more pervasively across other teams and other projects. Getting this right, our take, is critical to your business's success. Scaling these practices and figuring out how to break away from that pack and do so quickly, I think will have a tremendous impact to your organization and the businesses that you support. Now, what we found as part of our research, there are a host of ways to do this. But one of the things that was, I think, the most profound portion of the research is that benchmarking and aggressively measuring your progress is critical to breaking free from this pack and moving your organization to the next phase of your DevOps evolution. Now, that could be a relatively daunting set of challenges. And there is an additional dynamic at play that's worth being aware of as well. So beyond benchmarking, beyond aggressively measuring your progress, we see another critical dynamic to navigate when you look at modern software delivery. And that is that the worlds of infrastructure and application delivery, as I'd mentioned before, they're merging and they're blending. And so a lot of the technologies and the practices and even your roles are starting to look really similar. And so pick your cliche. If it's software's eating the world or every company's becoming a software company, there's an aspect about that that's really true, for as cliched as some of those phrases sound. And we're thrilled about this change because as this world becomes increasingly software-driven, as a company that started with our roots in taking something that was not software, like infrastructure, and helping you manage it as software, we think this is a tremendously exciting time. There's a nuance, though, that's been different. I would say as these worlds have been merging over the course of the last few years, and especially we see this happening a lot more in the cloud has largely been someone else's servers. But there's a pretty profound nuance that started to emerge really quickly over the course of the last year or so in this cloud-native world. And that is that the whole stack, from your applications that you're deploying through the core infrastructure that's running it, in a cloud-native environment is truly programmable. Well, so what? So what does that mean? Well, that means that a lot of the practices that you have on your traditional portion of your stack, things like continuous integration, continuous deployment, version control, config management, provisioning, these sorts of things that are ultimately powerful, they're kind of nice to haves. In a modern cloud-native world, those are imperatives. Those are requirements. You don't have to look much farther than something simple like an API. So if you have an API that's robust, it's well formatted, it's well documented, across a traditional stack, that's pretty great. It allows you and teams that are consuming your services to be able to interact with it a lot more easily. But I suspect there's a lot of you in this room who've been part of a pretty painful an integration project that ultimately proves, though it's nice to have a great, powerful, and well-documented API, you can roll your own and get away without having one. That doesn't work in a cloud-native world. If you're interacting with a service, not a set of endpoints out there, and you need to do something with, let's say, a PagerDuty service, you have no choice but to ultimately interact over a set of APIs. You have no choice but to have automation built in, regardless what portion of the stack that you're managing. And so we see this as a really thrilling and exciting change. One of the things that we've done recently here at Puppet is we have a board of CIOs that we work with. Most of them are not Puppet customers. They're from large institutions around the world. And they're either CIOs, CTOs, and many of them kind of serve double duty as CISO as well. And in one of our recent meetings, we were asking them, so how does this shift impact your organization? Are people terrified? Are they excited? What kinds of challenges do you see? And I was really surprised how excited so many of these CIOs were about this shift to cloud native. And I think the crux of the discussion centered around the idea that so many CIOs that we were talking with, they said, well, look, in the past, we've seen these really promising technologies, but for whatever reason, our teams weren't ready to adopt them. We didn't have the practices in place. We didn't have the muscle memory in place. And so we missed that wave, and frankly, so did most of our counterparts in the industry. Or you see something different where the teams are ready. They're chomping at the bit. They see this promising set of new technologies, but the technology just fails to deliver on that promise. With the success that we see our customers having with DevOps, the practices and their tooling, the success that we see them having as they start to move to this modern cloud-native world, and we see these really promising sets of technology that we believe they're there. The time is right. I think Tarun said it best, CTO at Prudential, when he said, there's never been a better time to be an engineer. The emerging technology, it's wonderfully promising, and the teams are ready to actually take advantage of it. That's where we come in. We're here to help with whatever comes next. As it relates to this move to a cloud-native world, as it relates to adopting whatever's next, there's a couple things that strike me that I'm particularly proud of when I look back across my time here at Puppet, but really my chance of working with many of you and your counterparts around the world. First of all, as the organization that ultimately invented infrastructure as code and pioneered that in the early days, this move to everything being software, it's thrilling to us. I mean, this is exactly what we love about what we see in the industry, and we believe our role in it. I think the second thing is, as I look back at what Puppet has been really great at over the course of the last decade, it's working with people like you to figure out how to adopt whatever's next. Years ago, this was virtualization. And then it was working with you to move to the cloud, adopt DevOps practices, pick up the latest security hardening practices. And so I'm thrilled to get a chance to work with all of you as you either adopt or mature your practices in this cloud-native world. I think it's something that we love to do, something that we've been great at doing in concert with you. And so as you adopt the next moves in cloud-native, or whatever's next, or whatever's after that, we look forward to going on that journey with you. Now, the question is, so how do we get there? And rather than have me tell you about that, I want to introduce our Chief Technology Officer, Deepak Giridhari Gopal.